So in today's web dev tip, we're going to take a look at something called access modifiers in TypeScript and how you can use them to control access to the data and functions that are available in your classes. So in our previous web dev tip, we were looking at this particular user class, and you can see it's got several different properties in here for name, age, and isProDev, and an extra one that we've created here for logged in. And when we create a new object, we're going to assign these values here to the name, age, and isProDev if that's been supplied. So when we actually run this code, let's just run the command to start that. You can see we get the object here with all of those properties defined, including the ones in the constructor and outside as well. So in our code, what we can do here is we can say console.log user1.name, for example. If we just run that again, we should see the text of Sarah being displayed underneath there as well. And we can access all of these properties on the object that's created because they're all set as public. So you can see that in the constructor here, these three are set as public, and this logged in property here is implicitly public because that's the default for any member variables that you create. So the opposite of public is obviously private, and we can apply that as a keyword to any of these member properties. So for example, if we wanted to make the user's age private, we can use the keyword there. And then down here where we're logging out the details of the user, if we were to then try and console.log out user1.age, you'll see we're getting a compilation error in TypeScript because we've marked that particular age property as private. We're no longer allowed to access it from our code. And you can see the error message that TypeScript is giving us is saying that age is private and it's only accessible within the class user. And that basically means that within your code, you're not able to reference that age property. But because the TypeScript gets compiled down to JavaScript and there's no real concept of private member properties within JavaScript, then there are ways that you can get around this. But this just helps you prevent making mistakes within your code and trying to access things which you've marked as private, which you've decided that shouldn't be accessed outside of this class. You can still, of course, within the class access the age property. So for example, in the login function, if we needed to access the user's name for some reason, we can still access this.name. That's no problem because it's public at the moment. And if we make it private as well, just by changing it up here, you can see we're still able to do that as well. It's just any code outside of the class is not able to access anything that you mark as private. So as mentioned, the logged in property is implicitly public. So that's the same as putting this keyword here. And you may or may not want to mark all of your member properties as either public or private just to clarify their intended use, but otherwise they'll be implicitly public. So you can also use the private keyword on a function as well. So for example, if there was some reason to get the user's password, although we haven't got a password property on this particular class at the moment, we could actually mark that as private as well. So that could only be used inside of the code inside of this class. So down here, if we needed to call the getPassword function, and you can see TypeScript will give us the same sort of compilation problems, saying that it's private and only accessible within the class. So why you'd want to use private properties and functions is a whole nother subject. It's all to do with data encapsulation and making sure that you're only exposing things to the rest of your code which you think is appropriate. And that's a subject in itself. But just so you're aware that you can actually make various different parts of your code private so that it's only accessible within the class that's defining it. So that's it for this tutorial. Make sure you stay tuned for more web dev tips.